The most improved player for the season for the Cincinnati Reds was really no choice at all.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Reds. My name is Jeff Carr, and I'm glad that you're alongside me today. I have loved the Reds since birth. Seriously, I got baby pictures to prove it. And this is my 6th season, now going into my 7th off season, hosting this daily podcast about your Cincinnati Reds. I'm also the Locked On MLB channel manager, looking over the entire league every single day. Locked On Reds is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are all your team every single day. And Locked On Reds is for the Reds fan that knows what happened, but they want to know why. We're going to jump into the biggest topic each and every day going on in Reds country. We'll look at some geeky stats, but I'm going to make them make sense, because if they don't make sense to me, then I'm not going to try to explain them myself. But we're overall just going to have a fun time talking about the Cincinnati Reds every single day. Make sure that you subscribe, because we're going to be with you all throughout the off season. But I'm glad that you're with me here today, because we've been going through the Reds 2024 season, and today we will hone in on the most improved player and why the choice was really no choice at all. We'll look at who is the most likely to win this award next year, and we'll discuss a few Arizona Fall League developments to close out today's show. That's all coming up on today's Locked On Reds podcast that is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And where we will get started today is with the most improved player for your Cincinnati Reds in 2024, and that is Tyler Stevenson. Look, people were wondering if Tyler Stevenson was even going to be catcher number 1 heading into 2024. And now there's no doubt about that. Let's look back on this, because 2023 was a struggle for him. Although it was a full season, he was completely healthy all year long, just as he was here in 2024. He was also ineffective, because in 2023, although healthy, he had amassed 0.7 wins above replacement. He was barely better than a replacement level catcher overall. And a lot of that had to do with his fielding, but his hitting wasn't very good. He hit .243 for the season, got on base at a .317 clip, and he only slugged .378. The extra bases, they just weren't there. But I mentioned the fielding. He was bad at that. -3 blocks above average. So, pitches in the dirt or pitches that could go by him, he was allowing more than the average catcher to get past him. When it came to catching a guy trying to steal a base, -2, caught stealing above average, so he was below average when it came to that. And then framing was really where the concern was. He was -9. So, that's really, really bad. In fact, I think he was one of the bottom 4 as far as qualified catchers go in the framing category. He was just horrible at it. 2024, big jump. You go from .7 wins above replacement in 2023 to 2.4 in 2024. Now, that's according to Baseball Reference. We mentioned on a previous episode that Baseball Reference and Fangraphs kind of have different calculations for wins above replacement, but they're generally pretty close when it comes to catchers. His slash line this past year, .258, .338, .444. You'd like to see the on-base percentage tick up a little bit more, but all of those were better than they were in 2023. And then his fielding got a lot better. His blocks above average went from -3 to -1, so still below average, but not as bad. Still below average, getting guys out, trying to catch them stealing, -2. But the framing took a big jump, went from -9 to -1. Again, still below average, but when you look at how he ranked among other catchers, he was actually respectable when it came to framing. And framing is an interesting thing. I don't know what your familiarity with it is, but if you watch the Guardians against the Yankees, and quite frankly, the Yankees as well, all of the catchers in the ALCS are fantastic at this. Getting the extra strike, the way that they catch the ball as it comes plateward, and the way that they kind of move the glove is good enough to make the home plate umpire believe that it's a strike. And it may actually have been a little bit outside the zone. They are so adept at this, whether it be, Naylor from the Guardians, whether it be Hedges, whether it be Austin Wells from the Yankees, or even Jose Trevino from the Yankees. They're all of the catchers in the ALCS are very good at this. And while Tyler Stevenson is not on their level, he's a lot closer to their level than he was in 2023. 2023, he was not good at this at all. But that just shows you the jump that he had. It's a night and day feeling about Tyler Stevenson, where we are at this time this year as opposed to this time last year. And kind of looking at who he had to compete with, it was really just Jonathan India, and there really wasn't anybody else. As annoying as, and then I'm looking at position players as well. As annoying as it was, this year was not that great for guys taking a jump. In fact, most of the guys actually took a step back. But Jonathan India did take a little bit of a step forward, but it wasn't as big in most areas as you think. His batting average, very comparable. His slugging percentage, he actually got worse than he was in 2023. The only thing that really took a big jump forward was his on-base percentage for Jonathan India. So I look at that, and in his defense, he did take a big step forward, but I don't think that all of it was as big of a step forward as Tyler Stevenson's was. In fact, if you compare Jonathan India's WAR in 2023 as opposed to what it was in 2024, it was almost identical. You went 1.4 to 1.7, so not that big of a jump. Huge jump for Tyler Stevenson. But if you want to look on the pitching side of things, it's Hunter Greene. I mean, Hunter Greene won the Best Pitcher award on this team, but he was also the most improved pitcher on the team. A lot more innings pitched year over year, a much better ERA year over year, much better overall. But position player-wise, Tyler Stevenson, he was the most improved. And quite frankly, he's a guy that looking forward, he's where, or at least close to where we thought he would be his first really full season until he got hurt. Remember in 2021, he was absolutely lights out, just going crazy. And a lot of his numbers were just, they were slaves to small sample sizes because he actually dealt with injuries, only played 50 games. But in those 50 games, he was putting up some gaudy numbers, some things that made you think, man, cleanup hitter for sure, for sure. And while I'm not there, I think that the Reds need to go out and get a cleanup hitter. I believe that Tyler Stevenson is a guy you can count on in 2025 to be a run producer for you. He showed us all year long, if you needed a line drive, if you needed that hit into the gap in the outfield, he was the guy to do it. He was the guy that was bringing in Ellie most of this time, and I feel like he is going to be that guy moving forward. And quite frankly, somebody I think that they should sign long-term. Let's have that conversation. We try to steer away from that because the contract side of things, there are so many variables. It's easy to kind of get caught up in this idea of, well, if they don't sign a guy long-term, then what's wrong with him? What's wrong with the player? And it's never the case where it's just as easy as, well, player A won't sign long-term, so player A doesn't like the Reds. That's not the case. It might just not be he's getting the right contract offer. But I digress on all of that stuff. I would like to see Tyler Stevenson extended this offseason. His improvement that he showed proved that, number one, he was still getting over the surgery to repair his broken collarbone all throughout 2023. As even though he was healthy and he didn't really deal with injuries or anything like that, it was clear that he was still trying to get confidence back after that freak injury that happened in 2022. So I believe that we are seeing the guy more like the guy of what we expected whenever he was called up for the Reds way back in 2020. Feels like forever ago. But I think that he has earned the next contract from Cincinnati. But, looking at who it was that was the most improved this year, who has the shot to be the most improved next year? That's a long list, but I'm going to give you my pick coming up next. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return over on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. You don't even have to win. And even though Reds baseball's over for the year and you can't hit on that LE parlay that I was giving you, you can check out Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and some other great Bengals prop bets over on the offensive side of the ball. I wouldn't touch their defense just yet, although the Browns did just trade their top receiving threat. I don't know that they got Nick Chubb. Anyway, whatever. Look at the Bengals offense. Don't look at their defense. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and download America's #1 sportsbook. We are talking Cincinnati Reds here today, all day, every month, all year long. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Reds to get at least 30 minutes of Reds talk in your feed every single day. And I talked about why Tyler Stevenson is the most improved player for 2024. Let's look ahead. Let's do a really early prediction, and I'm sure we'll revisit this as we get closer to spring training, and Steve and I will have spirited discussions about that. I messed up that one. Anyway, about who it could be. My pick's going to be CES, and quite frankly, I don't know that it's going to change between now and then. Christian Encarnacion-Strand had a rough 2024. And while he didn't show like a huge sample size in 2023 for us to really know who he is as a Major League Baseball player, we saw flashes of it early on. We saw flashes of it in the short amount of time he was with the Reds. And I believe that he is the kind of guy that if he plays to what his potential looks like, he could be that cleanup hitter. And I'll keep saying this all throughout the offseason. I want the Reds to go get a guy, a veteran player who has proved he can be a cleanup hitter for this team in 2025. I'll feel a lot better about their playoff chances if they do that. But if CES plays up to his potential, he could be the cleanup hitter for this team. I believe that wholeheartedly. I believe he could lead this team in home runs, lead them in RBIs. He could lead them in slugging percentage. He has a really, really good bat. He showed that all throughout his minor league career. But I think that he was plagued by injury even when he was on the field in 2024. We heard, we harped on it a lot, everydayers will know here on the show, that whenever CES hit the IL for good in 2024, David Bell used the term, we've known all along that it was ligament damage in his wrist. Okay, so based on that, he was dealing with ligament damage in his wrist all along for the entirety of, the little bit that he played. But in 116 at-bats last season, he slashed a .190, got on base 22% of the time, and slugged .293. He had 2 homers in 116 at-bats. That's not who CES is. And I think that because we've seen that, there's a lot of folks that are ready to write him off and say he's not ever going to be who we hoped he could be. He's not even, we shouldn't have even hoped for him, basically, is where I'm hearing a lot of folks when they talk about CES. But I think that there's something there, and I think that he's fully healthy right now. He's playing in the Arizona Fall League for the Reds, and he's only played in 3 games, but he's hitting 500 in those 3 games. I think that is going to kind of be the key. Does he look like he is just a overmatch for most of the pitchers out there? Because most of the pitchers in Arizona are minor league pitchers. So he should just rake out there. And right now he is. But I think that when he gets healthy, he's been dealing with the wrist problem, whether it be one broken bone, the other broken bone, or torn ligaments, or what have you. He dealt with the wrist the entire season until he finally hit the IL for good. He's coming back healthy and ready to go in 2025. I think he's going to prove to us that he is who he thought he is who we thought he could be. I'm trying to channel my inner Dennis from the Vikings, former Vikings coach. But yeah, it's not working. Anyway, I think CES will be the most improved player in 2025. Now, who's he going up against? Because quite frankly, the list is long. So many Reds had either subpar or just straight up bad seasons this season. And I feel like Noelvi Marte will probably be his biggest competition, but you have to ask yourself this. Did Noelvi Marte just go through a sophomore slump, or is it something else? Because as much as we barely saw enough of CES to really know who he was in 2023, we saw even less of Noelvi Marte. Noelvi Marte only got a handful of games before his PED suspension that made him miss half the season in 2024. And then when he finally came back, he was god-awful. Steve and myself have both said, and we both agree, that he should begin 2025 in AAA. Now, does that mean that he could set the world on fire in Louisville, get called up, and go crazy? Absolutely. And if that happens, then he will definitely be at the top of the list for most improved player for the Reds in 2025. But I almost wonder a little bit about him because all aspects of his game were off in 2024. He didn't hit very well. He got thrown out on the base paths a lot. Notably, game 162, he was picked off as the ghost runner on second base in the extra innings. I'll keep saying that all offseason because it just annoyed me so much whenever it happened. But he did that. He was very inconsistent in the fields. He made some plays at third base that you're like, that's the guy that we really liked to watch play for that little tiny bit in 2023. But he made a lot of bonehead errors as well. And the errors seem to far outweigh anything else that he did. So I kind of wonder who he is, and I think he's got to prove who he is. It's a blank slate / maybe even a little bit toward the negative side on the trust-o-meter when it comes to Noelvi Marte. And you come up with a graphic for that, probably. Anyway, Spencer Steer, Jamin Candelario, I think probably challenge CES the most for this. Spencer Steer, and hear me out on this, he had a subpar season. And somebody's going to say, well, he had over 20 homers, he had over 90 RBIs. How was that a subpar season? Because his batting average was so much lower. His on-base percentage was so much lower than even he was projected. And projection systems are conservative almost to a fault. And even the conservative projections were still higher than where those numbers ended up being. The fact that he hit in the 230s and he still got 21 homers, Spencer Steer could be a 30-homer guy. He could be a 100 RBI guy. He could be a middle-of-the-order threat that we're looking for. I don't want that to be the expectation. I would love for him to prove that in 2025. I'm not going to put that on him and say that's what I'm expecting him to do. But just think for a moment, like he hit 40 points higher his rookie year as opposed to his second year. Dude went through a sophomore slump real hard. So how does he bounce back from that? What's that look like? He could definitely be in the runnings for this most improved player. And then Jamer Candelario, he did not play to the back of his baseball card in 2024. I'm going to stand by that all off season long. That's not who he is. Jamer Candelario in 2024 is not who he is as a player. I think he will be better in 2025. I just think that CES will be that much better than everybody else. And then on the pitching side of things, because I mentioned, I try to delineate the two because it's really hard to compare pitchers to position players. Because if you ask pitchers, they're the most important. And if you ask position players, they're the most important. Things like that. But the performance-wise, I try to separate the two. So on the position player side of things, that was the list. And I think Will Benson, I would love to say that he will win the award. I just don't know when he gets out of Louisville. At what point does he hit the trust level needed to make it back to the major leagues? And don't forget, he was on the roster with Terry Francona in Cleveland. And Cleveland thought it was okay to trade him to Cincinnati. I don't know what that means for him in 2025, but I don't think that equals handing him the reins to right field on opening day. Just that's my 2 cents about that. But anyway, on the pitching side of things, Alexis Diaz is the favorite to be most improved pitcher because, quite frankly, we've seen him at his elite level, and we saw him last year. Big difference. Can he get back to that elite level? It's going to be your most improved pitcher for 2025, and I don't know that it's particularly close. But my pick on the position side of things, Christian Encarnacion-Strand will be your most improved player in 2025. There were a few updates. The Arizona Fall League continues to rage on. We've got a handful of games under our belt here for the Glendale Desert Dogs, as the Reds Arizona Fall League affiliate is called. And there were a few updates, a few things that we need to pay attention to. We'll get into that coming up next. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets today with Game Time. It's the best way to get down to the stadium, to get down to the arena, to get down to the show. Game Time has it all. Even though MLB, well, at least the Reds part of the MLB season is over, you can get you some playoff tickets on Game Time, by the way. You can also go to NFL, NBA, NHL, college games, so much more. Cyclones tickets are on Game Time. Plus, they've got great stuff, performances like comedian performances. You've got concerts and stuff like that. Theater performances can all be found on Game Time. And you can always check your view from your seat because Game Time makes it easy to get that ticket. Plus, the closer you get to the event starting, the better your price will be. And you can download the Game Time app today and create an account and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. And did your fantasy season get off to a rough start? Bounce back with Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. It's so easy to see why they're the best, because you can win up to 100 times your money with Prize Picks. All you need is as little as 4 correct picks in an entry, and you could turn $10 into $1,000 just like that. All you need to do is pick your favorite players like Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, and find your favorite stats and click more or less. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even have to win. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks to get that $50 when you play $5. Prize Picks. Run your game. Make sure to take us with you when you can't watch Locked On Reds on YouTube, because we are on every podcast app there is. Subscribe today. All right, I want to close out today's show and wrap everything up by looking at Arizona, because there were some updates out there to pay attention to. The #1 update, and the guy that everybody's caring about right now when it comes to the Reds, Matt McLain. Matt McLain was actually scratched from a start that he was supposed to make back on Monday night, and then he did not play on Tuesday night, although that was scheduled. There is a thing that, when it comes to Arizona, every team has a mixture of prospects from different teams. And so you basically have like 2 waves of players you can use. So a lineup one day will be completely different the next day. They don't have guys playing back-to-back days or anything like that. This is a way for folks to get at-bats, but you want everybody out there to get playing time. It's not a thing of like playing the hot hand or whatnot. It's all part of a schedule and a training regimen. But he should be scheduled to play tonight, so we will definitely be monitoring to see if Matt McLain is playing for Glendale in tonight's Arizona Fall League game. There have been no other updates as to, what the injury is or what's going on, why he was scratched. It could just be for super precautionary reasons, like it's Arizona. you don't have to play through an injury out in Arizona if it's like a little bit of a strain. However, all the injuries he went through in 2024, definitely want to monitor that. The guys that did play, though, Edwin Arroyo had a nice night. He had a hit, a walk, scored a couple of runs, got a steal. I still think he's going to get a full year in the minors in 2025. Talking about a guy that barely made it to Chattanooga last year, or in 2023. And then in 2024, in spring training, tears his labrum, has to get it surgically repaired, misses the entire year. So he missed out on a full year of development, and he's not going to get the equivalent of that in Arizona. I think he might get enough that you could see him possibly begin the season in AAA. He probably begins the season in Chattanooga and then gets bumped up to AAA. But I don't know that we see Edwin Arroyo get the call up to the major leagues. He's only 21 years old. So I could see them giving him a little bit more time in the majors in 2025. Somebody who does have a shot, though, I think, to at least make the roster at some point in 2025 is Tyler Callahan. Tyler Callahan has had a rough go of it in the minors, and a lot of it's just been to do with injuries. He had an elbow injury that basically took out an entire year in 2021, and he's kind of been trying to recoup that time ever since. Now, he's been playing pretty well out in Arizona. On Monday night, he went 2 for 5 with an RBI and a steal. But consider this, because last offseason, the Reds did not add him to the 40-man roster to protect him from the Rule 5 draft. That's something that happens at the end of the winter meetings in early December, which we'll talk about that here a little bit, as we get closer to it. But the Reds and all of the major league teams only have a finite amount of guys they can protect from the Rule 5 draft. The idea with that being you can't just hoard all of your prospects and not call them up and all this other stuff. But he wasn't protected last year, and he wasn't drafted by anyone else. He was left here. But the way that he's been playing in Arizona, and he had a solid season in the minors this year, I think the Reds could add him to the 40-man roster to protect him from this year's Rule 5 draft, and then we might see him up in the majors at some point next year. He's not a guy that I think will push for starting time, but he could be an interesting player to add to the radar of the outfield depth chart. Don't think that that's particularly high, and he's going to be a guy that he's coming from an ultra dark horse position where it's not like he's got a lot of expectations, nor does he figure to get a lot of chances to impress. But what's he do with that time? I think he might get a little bit next season. He's 24 years old. As I mentioned, the whole injury is kind of derailing his development schedule. It's kind of put him behind. He only played 4 games in Louisville last year. So he's definitely going to start the year in AAA for 2025. Another guy, this guy was in AAA last year as well, Jose Acuna. He's only 21 years old, and he's about to be 22 actually here on October 20th, so not much longer. He'll be 22 probably by the time that we really talk about him being a huge deal to the Major League roster, but he was part of the Tyler Naquin trade. Whenever the Reds sent Naquin over to the Mets, the Reds got Acuna back. He pitched 3 scoreless the other night. Did walk 3 batters as well, though. That's going to be something to keep an eye on. He could be part of the pitching conversation in 2025, and I'd be intrigued to see that because he's got some nice stuff. Another guy with good stuff, but not a lot of control, is Luis May. Luis May got his second save of the Arizona Fall League season on Monday night, pitched an inning of relief with a walk and a strikeout. He hit 102 on the radar gun. Guy can throw. Only problem is he doesn't always know where it's going. We're talking about a dude who he could be kind of fun to talk about as a deep option in 2025, but if you look at his minor league statistics, which we don't love to really talk a whole lot about minor league statistics, but the one thing you can count on is the strikeout to walk ratio. Dude walks a lot of guys. I mean, we're talking about walk per 9 rates in like the 6 and 7 range. Steve and I always say you really want to shoot for like the 2s as far as like really, really good, and 3 you can kind of stomach. This dude's in the 6-7 range, and we're talking about low A, high A, and double A. Hadn't really pitched into the triple A level. 23 years old. We might see him, but I don't necessarily know what the Reds would get out of a guy like that. But the 102 is intriguing. I mean, velocity is a big, big deal. I saw a breakdown yesterday on Twitter of, well, why hasn't Shohei Ohtani had a huge effect in the playoffs? It's because the average fastball velocity he saw throughout the season compared to the average fastball velocity he's seen in the playoffs, there's a big, big difference. He's seen a lot more fireballing relief pitchers that are just kind of really throwing him off. And I think that that is a microcosm for what velocity means. You know, there's a lot of folks that always say, well, if you can throw it super hard, but you don't know where it's going, are you really that good of a pitcher? But there's so many teams now, and I believe that the Reds are one of these teams that they're stuff first, and then we'll teach you the command. Well, I'd be interested to see how Luis May develops his command this year, being at higher levels in the minor leagues, being a little bit closer to Derek Johnson, and probably closer to the middle of Derek Johnson's radar than he has been in years past. I think Derek Johnson might want to spend a little bit more time on Luis May and see if they can build him into something that this bullpen, because this bullpen could really use a dude hitting 102. That would be big time. And that's probably the way they're going to get it, because guys that throw 102 and they hit the free agent market ain't that cheap. Don't think the Reds sign a guy like that. But yeah, a couple of updates to keep an eye on out there in Arizona for the Fall League. But that'll wrap us up for this edition of the Locked On Reds podcast. Thanks as always for making us your first listen. Coming up on tomorrow's Locked On Reds podcast, Steve will be back with me. We'll be discussing some more things about this 2024 season, putting a bow on things. What do we make of Nick Kral's performance in 2024? We'll dive into that on the next Locked On Reds podcast. But hey, for your second listen today, check out Locked On MLB. Sully's got you covered for the playoffs with all of his great analysis and his witty humor as well. Got a link in the description of today's episode so that you don't have to go searching for that. But always, thanks for making us part of your day. We are all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. You can always trust that we will be Locked On Reds every single day.